Valheim, an early access survival game on Steam that showed the world that surprise Viking invasions in fact still happen. Like, on the one day it was all calm, but then the next day, boom, everyone was playing it. And it's been going up like crazy. So now that the friendly Norse merchants are at our doorstep once more, it's time to check out what Valheim does great and where does it fall flat on its face. Early access survival games tend to suffer from the same issues. They are incredibly janky, dreadfully unpolished, and they tend to not run very well. Incidentally, they don't survive too long. But Valheim seems to suffer from none of these issues. The first thing that caught my eye was that it's only 1 GB in size. Like, good grief. I remember when most games were 1 GB in size. That was very long ago. Now, it is actually obvious when you see the visual approach. Models look straight from early 2000s and textures have like maybe 7 pixels shared between them. And I'm fine with that. Resolution doesn't automatically mean quality, and you can make a killing with low-res graphics and some correct stylistic approaches. Valheim wins by managing a visually pleasing and stunning aesthetic with as little as possible, though it falls to the very next pit by having every eye-candy special effect enabled at the very start. So unless you turn every tick off from the options menu, the game looks like you're watching directly at the bloody sun through a window pane and someone smeared it with grease or something. But well, luckily the options menu is the first thing you'll see when you launch the game, so you get to test and tweak straight away. Valheim stars like survival games often start, you are thrown in. Like, literally, you fall from the sky. You're sent to the realm by Odin to wreck some eldritch gargantuan beasts, but upon arrival you've forgotten everything of your previous life, because that's what interdimensional travel, read dying, does apparently. So you proceed to reinvent fire and reasonably sharp stones, exploiting local nature and killing anything that moves. Although the first few hours you'll spend gathering loose stones and branches and killing off wild boars for their leather scraps. In the early game, Valheim is very fluid and actually doesn't feel grindy at all, but later on the grindy aspects quickly ramp up in some carefully curated aspects. Yes, I'm looking at you, Iron. Why are you so pained to get? It's like purgatory. But all in all, the gameplay feels pleasant. Like, felling tree is pleasant, building feels pleasant. Basically, if there's something that doesn't feel pleasant, it's throwing stuff. Valheim makes a conscious effort of making actions fluid and unobstructive. Your player character is responsive and reacts reasonably well to whatever input you choose to throw at it, except in combat, but more on that later. Pickups have a helpful glimmer around them, and you can auto-pick up them by walking over them. However, eventually this may get a little bit annoying though, because you may find your limited inventory filled to the brim with seeds, or wood, or stone half the time, like things that you most likely don't need. So pay close attention to what you pick up. Building mechanic revolves around a workbench and various other crafting installations that provide access to various opportunities and items, and provides area boundaries at the same time. The build system aims for maximum creativity in layouts. There is no global grid where pieces snap. Instead, pieces try to snap to previously placed objects. Most of the time this works well enough, but there may be problems, especially if you try and build things that are under walls or floors or whatever. Expect to manage hunger and rest, but you can't just down 80 kilograms of venison in one sitting and call it a day. You need to consume multiple food types at once to max out the buffs. Resting is simpler. Just sit by a campfire or in a reasonably furnished room and feel the battle readiness soar back in as you sink further into boredom. Hunger and rest serve to help more than hinder. You don't necessarily die if you forget eating or resting, you just don't get your HP high enough, and your stamina regeneration suffers. You will definitely benefit from having all the available buffs, especially in combat situations, because when you're well rested and well fed, you hit like a truck. And this is beneficial, especially later on when everything else hits like a truck as well. Now, I greatly enjoy with games exploring mechanics in this way, because far often survival games sink into the dreaded pits of meter watching that sucks the life and fun out of everything. Which bring us to combat. When you attack, you commit to it and you can't cancel it, so basically you just watch the animation to play through. But attacks themselves finish reasonably quickly, so unless you don't squander your stamina, you're most likely just fine. Unless you run out of it. And then you're in a world of shit. And it happens a lot, especially in certain areas. Melee combat is simple. You strike, parry with a shield, do various dodge rolls, and possibly a special attack depending on the weapon. For example, spears can be thrown, whereas knives have a surprise attack, special attack, which is like, haha, you are dead. Alternate blocks and hits to taste, and presto, pretty soon, mostly any enemy will just explode to loot beneath your feet. Most of the early game enemies aren't likely to pose a threat to you at all, but groups of them may try to flank you and overwhelm you very quickly. That is, when they can. Also, some enemies are just relentless. They do not want you around and will go to great lengths at proving that point. So know whom and with how many you're picking your fights with. Otherwise, you may end up a pancake. You're going to want to have a base or three handy whenever you're exploring, so that you always have a workbench at your reach to repair stuff, which is free by the way, or rest and recuperate, because good grief, there is a lot to explore. Valheim outright demands that you either have friends or reasonably indoctrinated strangers to play with. Like with most survival games out there, Valheim is better in groups, and in later game you basically need group work to get anywhere. Connecting and joining friends works reasonably well. A major downside is a limit of 10 players. Valheim, you gotta do better than that. This is a game that would benefit from 64-player servers, easily. PvP is elective, you get to choose yourself whether PvP damage is on or not, and this happens at a click of a button. Builders can be shielded with wards that prevent unauthorized players from building or opening doors and chests, but that doesn't prevent physical damage. Also, it'll take a time until you reliably get all the components to build the wards in the first place. Server administrators have the option to kick and ban players, but that's about it. Admins have very little control over what happens in a multiplayer world. And as admin, I'd like to see at least player lists, teleport commands, item spawning, and possibly a kind of creative mode added to the game, just so that I could ensure a better experience for the players on my server. All in all, I'm not exaggerating when I say that I've grown extremely cynical over promising titles in early access. Oftentimes, they just don't work. But Valheim cut through that cynicism like a knife through butter. It's a mature enough a title, and though I hope that I see the grindiness and the shortcomings in multiplayer and server admin aspects fixed in the future, Valheim is worth its price tag.